So welcome to all of you in the future who are going to use this. I am Phoebe Morad, Executive Director of Lutherans Restoring Creation. And I'm really excited to be joining you from Braintree, Massachusetts, joined today by Pastor Noni Strand in Salina, Kansas, and Pastor Booker Vance in Chicago, Illinois, who will be introduced to in a few moments and hear their story. But first off, I just want to let you know that you're here as an introduction to implementing creation care in your church and community. So as a grassroots movement, Lutherans Restoring Creation, we're always eager to equip as many stewards as possible. And the concept of bringing materials to life by hearing about each other's stories and real examples of this happening has always been what we know works. But now more than ever, we recognize the fact that being able to offer some kind of just hit play method is really critical right now to help all of you in all of your various contexts really imagine how the environment can fit into the rest of your church's mission. And most importantly, how it can actually be implemented, not just the ideas. So I'm going to move ahead real quick and just introduce you a little bit to who is Lutherans Restoring Creation. You'll see lots of pictures who will give you a better sense later of who really Lutherans Restoring Creation is made up of. And hopefully it's all of you listening right now. But for a little bit of background, it really started in 1993 when we have ELCA has a social statement on caring for creation. And thankfully, we have been able to take that caring for creation social statement and bring it to life. So it was really since 2009 that cohorts of people began to come together. And when you see all of these different characters laid out here on the screen, that's really all the different types of people that makes it a grassroots movement. So we have the evangelical church in America as a beacon and a guiding light. And those of us together that work in our communities are trying to lift up and usher the entire ELCA to do even more and to live that out and to make it clear to people in the pews that they have work in this as well. We don't necessarily just wait for social statements to come along, but we put our prayer into action. So putting prayer into action, I would like to start off by sharing what voices you're going to hear from tonight or today or whatever it is you're watching this. Could be in the middle of the morning. I want to introduce Reverend Noni Strand, and if you could go ahead and share your story as to how, not just that I dragged you onto this call, but how did you come to Lutherans Restoring Creation?
Well, it's good to be with all of you, and welcome to this wonderful ministry. I began my work with creation care back in 2007 when I served as a campus pastor at a small Lutheran college in the middle of Kansas, Bethany College. We formed a green team on campus and began really thinking about the various facets of sustainability: economic, spiritual, financial, social, and environmental sustainability as a campus community. And we did various things on campus, such as a community garden and recycling. We had an academic minor. And so it was a really rich and wonderful way to be involved in creation care. And when I left the college to start my new call at the hospital 5 years ago, I was looking for a way to invest my faith and connect that in ways that would be helpful to the church. So wonderful Phoebe got me connected to Lutherans Restoring Creation. And in 2015, the Central State Synod, which is Kansas and Missouri, we officially became a Lutherans Restoring Creation Synod by action of our Synod Assembly. And so now we have a mission table that is a group of volunteers. We meet monthly by conference call because we're spread from central Kansas all the way over to Missouri. And it's a wonderful group of dedicated volunteers who come together to share ideas, to offer workshops and educational events, and ways that we can help our congregations and individuals live out their call and their vocation as stewards of earth and all that God has made. And so we have partnered with various places like Camp Tomashinga and Hollis Renewal Center, which are our outdoor ministry places. We've gone to different parts of the Synod to offer workshops and engage people. And we have built a wonderful network across the Synod so that we can help support each other in the work that we do. I also work with a small group in our congregation, a creation care team, which, so those of you who are struggling in your congregational setting, I know all about that because we struggle. And then I also work as a creation care coach, have been trained by the ELCA and can serve in that way as well. So it's a wonderful ministry and hope that all of you can be a part of it as well.
Thanks, Noni. And I see I am down here next. I'll give you my quick brief story that I was fortunate enough to be in that gang of people that showed up in 2009 at a camp where David Rhodes and a few of his students came together and shared their curriculum, their idea of, listen, we're talking about this in seminaries and about creation care. How do we bring it to people in the pews? In 2009, I have to be honest, I had a little kid. So when my pastor mentioned that there was something going on in a camp in Chicago, man, it could have been anything and I would have been out of the house. However, it just so happened that my entire life I had spent working on environmental science policy, and so between the worlds of science and policy, and I never saw anything work for the environment like it didn't have any heart to it. And so when I showed up at this event and found out that my faith, my Lutheran faith, I just happened to grow up a Lutheran, I had no idea how much power could be behind that kind of faith. And unfortunately, I'd always seen it and read about it being kind of used against people for movements. This was for progress, and I was really inspired by that. And then you know, a few years later I started doing more workshops for them, and David Rhodes, who started the program, saw my background as a community organizer and kind of handed the baton as we're trying to make Lutherans Restoring Creation you know, more of an official nonprofit, to be that facet of the ELCA that can help usher us into implementing this more and more. So with that, speaking of implementation, Reverend Booker Vance, if you could speak to your role in all this and your history with us.
Well, my mother had a green thumb. She would get up early in the morning and go out and water her garden. And I'd often hear her out there talking, and I often said, Mom, who are you talking to? Well, she used the garden as a kind of therapeutic place where she could have conversations and not have argumentation from the plants. And that was one of the ways in which she kept her sanity. I was in the office at St. Stephen's Lutheran Church one afternoon, and the boys came into the room kind of screaming and hollering because there had been some boys out there from another group who had been throwing rocks and breaking windows and so forth. And they came in because they knew that the church was a safe space. Mm. But out of that event, I realized that the yard that we had at the church needed to be used for something a little more productive. And so we began the concept of doing urban gardening and building raised beds and growing collard greens, cabbage, romaine lettuce, tomatoes, corn, and a variety of things. And then use the summer day camp to teach the children about the garden. Plus, we also began to do a butterfly garden where we took, you know, the caterpillars or the larvae and watched the caterpillars grow, and then the caterpillars turned into, as you know, into butterfly. But we recognized in that same experience, we learned about migration, how the butterfly, the monarch butterfly, migrates from the south in Mexico all the way up to the north, and they follow a path of milkweed. And it was likened unto the migrant path that many African Americans had ventured from Mississippi and Alabama to Chicago. And part of that was they brought with them collard greens. And so we have milkweeds and collard greens that have a kind of a parallel discussion. And so that began our work in doing urban gardening and then trying to convince other churches to do urban garden as well. And I hooked up with a group, an organization called Faith in Place, and I was pastoring at that particular time, but learned a lot from them, and they came and advised and worked with some of our programs. And fate would have it, I would, after I decided to let go the ministry, I got involved with Faith in Place as a policy director and advocate And so I began to do not only the gardening, but also to talk about being a lobbyist and work legislation, to talk about care for earth and care for creation. And one of the major pieces was the Future Energy Jobs Act, which I was a part of. And part of that was about implementing what we talked about in theory and making sure it happened in communities, from job creation to job development and training, to looking at other ways in which we could do energy efficiency and be able to teach it and train people in communities. And that's why I got involved. And so another concept that I began to work with was this issue of environmental justice communities, and recognized that all my life in the communities that I had grown up in, African-American communities in particular, that there had been challenges of environmental injustice that was causing dynamics, whether it was health issues, whether it was asthma, whether it was hypertension, many of those issues. And we found in the legislation that we were talking about really healthcare and health issues. And so intersectionality is a very important part of the ministry I do, of making connections. And the other word that Phoebe is so fond of is implementation, that we can talk a good talk, but if we can't implement it in communities, then it's to no avail. And so that's why I came to this conversation. It turned out I walked into some people that I known for about 20, 30 years ago. Noni Strand's name came up, and as well as Mark Anderson, and both of those folk I had gone to school with in Lynchburg. And both of them are really engaged in this work. And I was excited to see that there was an opportunity to reunite with them in the work that they were doing. I still love Lynchburg. I had cut my teeth in Lynchburg, but trying to make the connection between urban agriculture and what's going on in and then what's going on, whether it's legislation that needs to go on in Kansas or other places about solar and wind and other things. Making that kind of interconnection is the part of the work that I'm involved with. And that's why I'm into the Care for Creation or effort that we're talking about today.
Wow, Booker, I feel like your life path touches all of the different things that we're going to talk about today. Just you particular as a character, just have all of these things are covered. So thank you. And speaking too of, so back to the idea that yes, Lutherans have all of these great ideas and things written down, and we have programs. It really does come back down to how do we implement all these things. But when you might go to your church and say, you know, we should be doing this, but they might come back at you and say, but okay, so why us? And why is it Lutherans restoring creation and not just all people of faith or just everybody doing this? Yes, everybody sees a reason to do this work, but there's certain language that we have as Lutherans, and if you're trying to work with a particular group, it's nice to know that we have the integrity of our faith behind us. We have a lot of programs and background and foundation to draw upon, and common language to use. So as Lutherans Restoring Creation, we basically try to be a bridge between this kind of theological history we have and all of the programs and social justice work we have lifted up. And we use that as a bridge to usher people back into their communities to understand that their faith does have something to do with creation care. So we have a lot more material to reference that, but I really want to dive into why are we doing this, and especially why now. So I'll play this in a moment for you to hear from Dr. Ulysses, but I'd like Booker to tell us a little bit more about Ulysses. Who is this person?
So the connections and the story we've already talked about, people knowing people and how years pass and you get back to folk. When I was a young person at Augustana Lutheran Church in Houston, Texas, there was a young teenager who I looked up to as a little boy. Her name was Vivian, and I remembered her. I mean, I just remembered her as Vivian died of cancer, and unfortunately, but that was part of living. But I always had a fond memory of a father and a grandfather in particular who were ushers at the church. Well, when Ulysses, who was Vivian's son, decided to go to med school, he came to Chicago to Northwestern University. And out of his effort there, they as they know, they called up to Chicago and said, Booker, look out for him. And that was a journey of not only me looking out for him, but he came to me at a time when I needed really the energy of a young person in my ministry. And Yubi was the one. He had graduated from Morehouse College, was going to med school, but he was a light and was definitely, he's very strong in HIV and AIDS research, and was working on the HIV AIDS platform in relationship to working with churches. And so this is Ulysses, and he is who he is. He worked for the ELCA for a minute, but the structure got kind of binding, and so he now has his own LLC and is doing a number of things and still involved in the church. And so that's what Ulysses brings when he intersectionality and implementation, or critical parts of who he is and his ministry, and he's doing great work on the south side of Chicago.
Great. So he speaks especially to why now, and I think the particular crisis we're all going through, what you shared with me, I think it's worthwhile to share his voice. I would love to hear more from him in our future episodes as well. So this is just a taste, but.
Hey folks, can we talk? You know, when the body has an infection, such as the one that millions are battling around the world right now, the body responds by heating up. We call it a fever. An elevated body temperature then triggers cellular mechanisms that ensure the immune system takes appropriate action against the offending virus or bacteria. Now I want you to consider the earth, also a living, breathing entity that heats up when it's sick. It's why I firmly believe that global warming and the dynamism of climate change, along with the recent brash of wildfires and earthquakes and natural disasters, is Earth's mechanism to defend itself against an offending virus or bacteria. The bad news is we are the offenders. Even as the coronavirus ravages the human population, what has been an illness for us has been medicine for Mother Nature. Hear me out. Pollution and greenhouse gas emissions have fallen all over the world. For a brief period of time, you could actually see the tops of skyscrapers in China due to a 30% decrease in smog that normally clouds the country. Even here in the States, air quality over major metropolitan areas, including LA and New York and Seattle and Chicago and Atlanta, has drastically improved due to stay-at-home measures that have effectively shut down daily life and all of the pollution that comes with it. Lions in South Africa have taken back roads in national parks that are normally heavily traveled, enjoying the freedom to roam without prospects of intrusive photographers or, even worse, deadly poachers. Wildlife is experiencing a renaissance as an earth once void of mankind returns to its roots, if but for a brief moment. The Christian creation story says that God created the heavens and the earth over 5 days, and on the 6th day, God created man. I believe the reason God took so much time making earth and only 1 day making man was because God knew that it would be the earth that would sustain us and not the other way around. So today is Earth Day, the now 50-year commemoration to heighten the consciousness of people everywhere, not only to change our lives, but to change the world for the better. Not for 1 day every April, but forever. Bluntly put, the earth is sick of us, y'all, literally. And we shouldn't have to get sick just so that the world might be well. It's why I'm confident that we can coexist, both man and Mother Nature. Otherwise, the Creator wouldn't have entrusted this great Garden of Eden to us. But if we continue to fight her, if we continue to treat her in the way in which we have, we will lose. So let's not piss her off. Love each other and love Earth so we can both emerge from this fever stronger than ever. Remember, we all used to be somebody else. What's most important is that we're always working to be better today than we were yesterday. You be the cure you wish to see on earth. Peace and blessings.
well, go ahead, Booker, if you want to relay why in particular what he had to share with us. I just love that. He titled this piece, "The Earth is Sick of Us."
One of the things that's important about this COVID virus is how to help people locally understand the dynamics that are going on and the impact. This virus didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of because of neglect and some of the behaviors of we as people of Earth and the impact upon it. And now this virus is a part of it. And so he does a good story about the historical impact of this virus and talks about the pandemic that happened in 19 and 17 and 18 and how the United States responded to that one and how we need to learn from that event and how we can be better looking out for each other, doing safe distancing, doing washing our hands, and doing generally education and awareness of looking out for one another, whether it's masking and otherwise. And he does a very, call it a real down-to-earth kind of presentation that's real relaxed and easy and makes it kind of easy for you to kind of buy in and follow in to the direction that he's going. And,
yeah,
that's
makes it very clear, that big word of intersectionality that you mentioned before. I mean, it's just, it's right there in front of our face. And so to why now, especially now, I think a lot of people are putting on the brakes to every other issue that might be, out there. But the fact that all of these issues intersect and that this particular type of crisis opens up and we see where all of the holes are, where we haven't been taking care of each other from the very beginning. So Noni, the other young person we have on the screen here too, I'd love you to introduce everybody to who else is here.
Sure. Josh Thede is the one wearing the KC Royals cap in the middle of that picture. And again, it speaks to, I think, the time that we're in right now as the church grapples with COVID-19 along with the whole society and the whole world. It's an opportunity for us as the church to be relevant to what the needs of the world are right now. The issues that we're facing, whether it be racism or healthcare, all the things that we're dealing with. And Josh is a perfect example of a younger person who needs the church to be relevant for his life. He was a camp counselor when he was in college, and he came to one of our events, one of our Lutherans Restoring Creation workshop events at Camp Tomashinga, because he was invited by another young person who had served with him. And Josh is a wonderful example of a person who lives out his vocation every day of his life. He's an acoustical engineer, and he serves on the Sustainability Council of Mission, Kansas, where he lives. He serves on our mission table for Lutherans Restoring Creation, and he is also a co-founder of Drawdown of the Heartland. For him, he wants to live out his faith each and every day. So he's not necessarily a member of a congregation, but Lutherans Restoring Creation is what has brought him back to the Lutheran Church. He had been disconnected since his days in camping, and he found something relevant about the church through caring for creation, working with climate issues, and finding a way that he could really live out his faith daily, both in his work and in all the things that he's a part of. So it's been a wonderful, LRC is a wonderful way to connect young people. I saw this on the campus too. Many of the students were not necessarily religious, but they hungered for meaning and purpose and value. And they found in their connection with the earth and issues about earth keeping and how we live together as created beings, they found something very meaningful. And I think this is a place that the church can be very, very out in front to help lead our society into something that's really critical at this point.
Thanks, Noni. So speaking too of being relevant, just to bring up if people, I know that a lot of us immediately think of neighbors as the people right next door to us, but our Christian faith asks us to think of those people that we can't picture and the most vulnerable among us. And I think immediately some of the issues that we can offer by bringing Caring for Creation ministry into our churches is to try to think of the people that we don't see every day, even on our own street. So one picture I'm just going to share with you. This is from one of our Lutheran counterpart congregations in Alaska. And when I spoke to the bishop in Alaska, Shelley Wickstrom, and she was explaining the fact that the people in Shushmera, this is a picture from 2016, they've been in the process of having to relocate. And it's not just leaving one's home. When she expressed to me the fact that the great majority of people that live in Alaska are not part of any kind of our fiscal typical economy. They're part of a bartering economy. When they leave their land, they don't just leave everything they know and the nostalgia of the place. They learn they leave their entire way of being and being able to survive. So if rising sea level doesn't have to do with taking care of our neighbors, I don't know what does. Another quick shot just from Trini, who works in the ELCA's advocacy office. They did an incredible job of training a bunch of people, a bunch of leaders in the ELCA as to, when we talk about immigration, she works with Amparo, and here she is with one of her colleagues from Nicaragua who is explaining the fact that there's been a drought in South America for over a decade now. So there are lots of reasons that people are fleeing and coming to our border. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the climate that we've created for ourselves has been destroying other populations. So it is all interconnected, and intersectionality, let me just move this around a little bit, just so you're aware too, the fact that I know in a lot of environmental stuff we'll have a lot of trees and a lot of polar bears, and while that might bring us personally into a place closer with our faith, the actual action and being there for one another, especially with public health crisis, with all of the social justice issues that we bring up in prayer all the time, these are all exacerbated by the fact that we haven't figured out yet how to share our resources such as power, air, water. All of these things impact our neighbor, not just polar bears on a melting glacier. So I just wanted to lift those things up, and we can, we have lots of material that will help you dive into that further if you so choose. But when you might be working with a congregation and come up against, yeah, this is important, but we need to deal with people first, this does have to do with people. So right off the bat, we're going to get into some stories about congregations that have taken creation care into their communities. But first off, I just want to highlight the fact that we're essentially asking you to affirm what it is that our ELCA has already said in 1993. It's nothing brand new, but it is a beautiful piece. If you'd like to read it, it's about, 20 pages, I think. It's not that long. It's good. It's timeless. It is something that you can read together, or just read the covenant that is basically affirming what that says. That's just a one-page piece of paper. We also have it adapted into Spanish. But that's for you to bring to your church council to see if anybody else there sees this as something that can enhance their congregational life. And if that doesn't work, then you can still dive into all of these action plans that we'll talk about and see where it fits. It's the acting together that I think really brings life to this. I don't know, Booker, if you want to talk a little bit about that important word, implement.
So yeah, clearly what happens in the conversations is that you don't want to walk away from a gathering of folk with idle talk. You want to talk about ways you can make it happen, and ways in which you can work together to make it happen. One of the things that Phoebe and I both share is a community organizing background. And community organizing is about using your assets, using people, and using all the resources you have together to make sure that you make a difference. And one of the experiences I had on the south side of Chicago was Barack Obama was the organizer in the churches that we were organizing on the south side. And so I had the privilege of working with him and seeing how, how he was real clear about helping us become churches working together that made a difference. And but the other part that was real clear is that we had to talk about the communities in which and the context in which we serve. Many of our congregations on the south side of Chicago and around the city were in poverty areas. I mean, they were poverty zones. While they were neighborhoods that we'd grown up in, they were poverty zones. And if we didn't understand that in our work, we were missing the point. And so it's just very important for us to consider, how do you understand what your assets are? How do you know your neighborhoods? And then how do we begin to talk about some real concrete action that makes change, whether it's through legislation, whether it's through organizing on your aldermen or any of the folks that you need to do in order to make sure that change is happening in your neighborhood.
Thank you. And that's, really listening to what's going on in your community. And that means at your church level as well. So if you find, if you have a great idea, but nobody else is working on that right now, it might just have to wait a little while. Try to see, what's giving life to your church congregation and your community right now and what you need to react to. So one way the organizing kit that we hope helps people through this process of thinking of what to do next is thinking of most churches as having somebody or maybe a committee in each one of these areas: worship and music, Christian education, buildings and grounds, discipleship, and public witness or advocacy. So these are ways that we've set up our guide to give you some ideas. And what's going to happen now is we're going to share some really brief ideas. But as we get further down the line in the next few months, we'll be able to share some very more specific ideas and tools as to how to kind of parcel this out. But the most important part, thinking about how to parcel all this stuff out, is knowing that you're not meant to be a one-person band in any of this, that you're there looking in your community, whether that's in your church or outside of your church community. You're looking for people to help you play the instruments, and not everybody should be playing the same instrument. We all need to come together playing different things, but hopefully the same tune to make some beautiful harmonies together. So we really want to focus to get you going on the right step, to know that you're not alone, to help you think about who are the right people to help you right now, what doors are open, and what is your congregation looking for. So we're going to start off hearing some good stories from Noni on those.
Okay. I think it's really important to understand the context that you're in. In our synod, we have rural, urban, suburban, we have the whole gamut of contexts. And so what works in one congregation may not work in another one, but that's okay. It's just important to know who are the people you're working with, and how can you galvanize people to find some common ground to work together. It doesn't have to be a huge group. We have congregations that have started with just 2 people and have done some amazing things. Having the pastor on board as an ally is very helpful, but don't expect the pastor to be the one that's going to drive everything. It's helpful to have relationships with various people around the congregation to understand the processes that you're going through. We have found, like in our little congregational group, we found a great ally on the church council when we went with the covenant. Someone we didn't even know that was interested in creation care. So there are allies out there as you get to know people and as you get to understand what people's interests are. It's important that you really focus on what people are interested in. If you look at this little group in the center with their trees, this was a wonderful group in Prairie Village, Kansas, a suburb of Kansas City. They have a Saturday morning breakfast that they serve for people in need. And so part of what they have done is they have planted an orchard of apple trees so that they can use their apples to help serve people on Saturday mornings. And it's this very delightful group of people that you can see there in that, and they're very committed to the ministry of their congregation and how can they reach out with their creation care to help other people. The other congregations are doing things in education and doing things in other areas of congregational life. But again, to find the common ground and the things that are of interest. In my context in central Kansas, it's very important that I not begin with climate change, because I will immediately turn off 75% of the people that I am around. So again, beginning with things that people are interested in. We have partnered with existing things like God's Work, Our Hands. That was something that we did collaboratively with the other Lutheran churches in Salina. And so that was a way that we could begin with some common ground already in place. People care about the future. People care about their children. People care about their grandchildren. So how can we work together to help build a future that is healthier for everyone? There are some ways that we've also partnered with schools. Different congregations have worked with grade schools to do Earth Day kinds of things in their grade schools. We, in our context, we worked with a local university, and so they had a lot more outreach and a lot more connections. So we were able to do some events that really drew in a larger part of the whole city and invited other congregations, not just Lutheran, but other denominations to be a part of that as well. So building partnerships within your congregation, within your community, can really help to build this kind of ministry so that people can really become engaged and can really move things forward. So it's not just, like Booker said, it's not just something that you talk about, but it's something that you implement.
So Booker, we have a lot of pictures from your stories. So I'm going to hand it over to you if you can explain what's going on in some of these, and you just tell me when you want me to go to the next slide.
Sure. So
I hope you can see us now, right?
Oh, I can see you fine.
Okay, good.
Well, to piggyback on what Noni talked about, particularly in an area like Kansas and areas like Chicago, when you start doing the green teams, which is a good concept, every now and then you have to gather the green teams together so they can hear each other's story, encourage each other to find out different ways in which people are doing things. In Chicago, Faith in Place has a green team summit, and they gather about 500 plus more green teams from around the state, and they come one Saturday in the Field Museum, and it's a wonderful event, but they walk away learning about that. And one of the things that we've done from the Green Team Summit is the Eco Ambassadors training, which you see an example of that, where we get teenagers who for the summer for about 6 to 8 weeks work as eco ambassadors, where they're trained about the different dynamics of earth and care and what's going on and how they can engage in that. And it's a multicultural group, both Latino, Asian, white kids, all groups from around the city, and that's a good thing. Also, part of that event, we talk about healthy eating in the summer day camp. We do the herbs from the garden as well as the vegetables from the garden, and we have a cook and serve it to the young people so that they can taste fresh vegetables and to do that kind of thing. I was telling somebody the other day, we do a kale and agave, and another vegetable they put together, bananas, I believe, and they put it together and they serve that to the kids in the morning, so they get all their vegetables in one glass early in the morning. And so that's a easy way to get around it. You can, next slide.
I need that recipe, by the way.
Yeah.
A little off topic, but I need that recipe.
Yeah, and I put the last phrase, I said, what have we learned? And so while we do these things, we're always talking about what have we learned or what do we get? So now this is an example of the garden. It's a community garden. One of the things that we found about our community garden was people were growing things in their backyard, and they were growing things, but the community garden gave a larger picture of what that looked like. And so as you can see, cabbage and corn and a number of things that were going on. And we had to learn some things about learning that we share the garden. So one time I nurtured, in one of the beds, I was nurturing a watermelon, and it popped up, and the cantaloupe popped up, and I was feeling pretty good, and I'd water it every morning. And what happens with watermelons, funny, is they come out under the leaf. You don't even see it for a minute. All of a sudden it jumps out. But then that next day, somebody walking by to see and they took it on, which is fine, because that's what you got to have. That's the other part, working with green teams and working folk. You have to let us know as ministries, this is not our stuff. This is stuff, and to keep us always in perspective that it's not, and that's the way you build the relationships. And so farmers market at the middle of the summer, where we do cucumbers, as you can see, and a number of green vegetables. We also had string beans that we were sharing also. Next picture. So here's, this is Grandma, I call her, she's the elder in the community. She does training with the cooking and so forth, but she was doing some pruning and doing some things there. And as you can see, that cabbage, man, we had laid that out in rows, and it was, but then we popped it up. And what happens on Sunday mornings, we hand out fresh vegetables after service and give it to people. Well, we bless it first. We take it to the altar as an offering, and then we bless it, and then we give it to folk afterwards. This next piece is, we had a lot of young men who are high school and older who were helping in the garden. And this young man is standing next to me. He's no longer alive, but he was grew up in the church and was a good kid, but he got into this little trouble. When he came out of the penitentiary, he started working in a garden, and it helped him so much. But unfortunately, he couldn't shake some of the influence of what was going on in the hoods. But that was a picture of us all standing together working. And so it's a safe place, safe space, and it's therapy. Continue to make that environment that way. Next, I think that may be it. No, yeah. Oh, so one of the other things that we do is that the churches work together. In Chicago, in particular, we have sometimes in the proximity of less than 2 or 3 miles, we may have 10 churches because when the immigrants came to Chicago, the Swedes built their own church, the Norwegians built their own church, different aspects of it. And so you may have 10 churches with different ethnic backgrounds. Now in the neighborhood, because it's all African American, the tendency is for us to continue to push that these congregations worship together. So this is Easter morning, and probably in 2009 or 8, and we do it on the lakefront and gather, and we start off, in the dark, building a fire, and just enjoy the sun coming up, and the whole issue of singing and doing that thing. So that's can you imagine what we do as churches and how that brings us together and how that unites us? You move on.
Yeah, certainly out of the church. Right. Not all in the church.
Examples, yeah.
Thank you. So I'm hoping that this is just kind of whetting everyone's appetite, basically, to all the different ways that bringing Care for Creation into the church life can enhance, and doesn't have to be a burden. It doesn't have to be, another committee and more meetings. And it doesn't have to be a point of contention. I'm sure that there will be disagreements, and that is part of our life together in relationship. But I think it's worth going through them. And so in some of our subsequent issues, I would really like to be sure that we maybe practice and share with each other sometimes when we have had to have those relationship talks with people and get through each other's differences to find common ground. But I hope that essentially this will invigorate some of you to go forward with the process of putting together a covenant with creation with your congregation, or simply moving forward and looking at what are some of the action steps you think you can fit in. If you do go through with the covenant process itself, this is our closing on the covenant itself. It really affirms each one of the topics that we go through. But I think the fact that we close really out of the essence of doing this out of love and out of a desire to teach the next generation. So I'll read this. We will explore the implications of these provisions together in grace-filled and non-legalistic way, seeking to find hope and joy in the commitments that these provisions may entail, and in the restorations that they engender. Because we desire to leave Earth a better place for our children and grandchildren, we will promote love and respect for creation in our youth, teach them responsible earth practices, and engage them in programs that restore creation. So I want to just mention the fact that we're going to move forward, and if people have anyone that you would like to suggest too, I'd really love to have some stories from the field to add. But I think this is a great way to start, and I'd love to know also if Noni or Booker, if you have other things that you thought of you wanted to add. No? Okay, so I feel like we scratched the surface on all of these, and again, there's lots of resources on a website, and on our site in particular, but I have to say that it's really hearing from one another. And once we're able to be together again in relationship, I do think it's worthwhile to, while this can scratch the surface and you can see pictures, being together is really important. And Noni, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, because Central States has had a number of different gatherings. What does that do for you?
I think it really helps to keep your energy going, and it helps with those times when you feel very discouraged, because this can be very difficult work, and there are times when you feel very alone. So I know for us, when we get on those monthly conference calls and just hear the energy of each other and hear what's going on in other contexts, it's very encouraging. It gives you the hope to go on and do continued work. We've also it's been so wonderful to be able to go and see different parts of the Synod. We travel to different places rather than asking people to go to like Kansas City or St. Louis, which we have done events there. But we also try to hit some of the rural areas and the places that often get left out, that feel a little bit left out of the Synod. And so we go to them and we learn from them, because we're all learning at the same time. We're all teaching and learning. The farmers have so much to teach us. And so we see this very much as a mutual upbuilding of people and learning from each other. And that's the way that our spirits are regenerated. And I think that's what keeps us going in this work.
Thank you, certainly. And Pastor Vance, can I put you on the spot to close us in prayer?
Sure.
That okay?
Yep.
Thank you.
Lord be with you.
And also,
with you.
Gracious God, we're just so thankful that you've allowed us to be co-creators and co-stewards of your creation. We just ask you to pray to open up our hearts and open the hearts of your people, that they might know this is the work that you desire of us, and this is the work in which we not only are fulfilled, but we fulfill your vision and mission for us. So Lord, continue to bless the work, bless the ideas, bless the communities that are listening and hearing the stories. May they be revitalized, may they be renewed, and may they be restored. It's in the precious name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
amen. Thank you.